Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the St. Louis podcast. As always, my name is Eric Brown. Thank you for tuning in. Of course, I'm the host of this thing that we do here every Friday, as well as CEO over at Vi Media, a marketing agency here in St. Louis, among other things. And today, as you can see, it's just myself. And have we been going in the last couple of weeks? And we're going to continue the trend this week. I think it was last week we talked a lot about, potential World War III incoming. Talked about how Ghislaine Maxwell is probably going to get a pardon and how she's been getting just the absolute dream scenario. And today, what I wanted to talk about is something I'm sure a lot of us discuss occasionally with our friends or family or whatever. It's the fact that the U.S. is the wealthiest nation in the world by several key economic metrics in 2025, boasting a nominal gross domestic product, GDP, exceeding $30 trillion, far surpassing China's 19.2 and Germany's 4.7, maintaining its position as the global leader since overtaking the British Empire 100 years ago next year, 1916. It equates to a per capita GDP of about $85,000, outpacing most peers, and reflects immense aggregate wealth driven by innovation, a robust financial sector, and tech giants. However, when measured by purchasing power parity, PPP, China edges ahead by around $10.2 trillion, highlighting how U.S. wealth doesn't always translate to affordability for citizens. And we're going to talk about, even though we are the wealthiest nation, we can just go ahead and see that in a lot of aspects, that doesn't really equate to how we see it as people here, citizens of the U.S. So what I wanted to talk about today was wealth inequality. You're like, Eric, aren't you a capitalist? Don't you want to make money off of this podcast and off of your marketing agency and the different businesses that you own? Yes, I do. But it doesn't mean that I have to, read this metric right here and like it, because it's, for a lack of a better word, it's fucked up, people. It's fucked up. Let's read it. All right. So Tesla and SpaceX CEO Elon Musk, net worth estimated about $485 billion. Lord knows that's not enough. He surpasses the combined wealth of the bottom 52% of American households. That encompasses over 67 million families. I will say that again. Elon Musk's net worth, estimated at $485 billion, surpassed the combined wealth of the bottom 52% of American households, encompassing over 67 million families. Obviously, this exposes the fact that we're getting absolutely fucked as normal, everyday citizens, considering that is just one of the richest people. Now, if you go ahead and add up Larry Ellison and, Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos and a couple other names, you can see how it only takes for a group about 5 to 10 people to essentially be able to own and run the United States, which is, essentially what Elon was able to do. He bought the election. Spent a bunch of money on the election. I shouldn't say bought it. Spent a bunch of money on the election. Then he essentially was a de facto ruler with Doge right after, obviously Trump got elected. And I was on the side of Doge at the beginning because I was like, one of the main reasons, of course, people on this podcast know this if they listen to it, that I voted for Trump was because inevitably all of the things that I've talked about on this podcast with us having no money, our debt, etc., I thought we were going to get spending under control, maybe balance a budget. But of course, as we know on this podcast as well, if you listen to it here weekly, which I do appreciate, of course, those that do. And of course, if you're a first-time listener or whatever time it is here that you're tuning in, I was proponent. I voted obviously for Trump, and of course, my sentiment has severely changed over not that long period of time here in 2025. And I think it's because we're just continuing down the path of what we're talking about here, which is, the richest people on this planet in the U.S. continuing to take more and more power, more and more money, as the large majority of the people here in the U.S. Cannot afford groceries, spend over 50% of their income just to live in an apartment or a house. Child care's through the roof. Health insurance is unaffordable. Meanwhile, we have, Mark Zuckerberg buying up 11 plots of land in Palo Alto. He has an island in Hawaii. He has a bunker there. Larry Ellison owns an island in Hawaii. I believe it's the smallest on the southern side. I could be wrong on that. And meanwhile, we got the majority of people fighting on Facebook, bickering back and forth to one another. Meanwhile, these guys and gals continue to absorb wealth at an increasing rate here in the U.S., which leads to what for us as the normal people, right? Even if you make $500,000 a year, all right, maybe not $500,000 a year, but even if you make $100,000 a year right now, right, and you have, 2 kids and, your wife or whoever, or vice versa, the guy, whoever is at home taking care of the child for the first couple of years, because of course, like I just said, childcare is not affordable, and that cost is through the roof. It makes it difficult. It makes it very difficult. And it's continuing to go in the wrong direction. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these things here. So as of October 22nd, so that is today, Wednesday, I'm recording this, Musk's real-time worth stands at $485.2 billion, driven primarily by Tesla's stock surge, up 89% year to date. And SpaceX valuations briefly crossed $500 billion earlier this month, the first person in history to hit that mark. This fortune, largely unrealized gains in equities, highlights how billionaires' wealth is tied to volatile markets rather than traditional income, allowing figures like Musk to borrow against assets tax-free while amassing unprecedented power, right? Obviously. So they're just playing by rules that, or no rules, I should say, are, they're in a completely different ballpark, right? These guys have no idea what it's like to be us, probably the average person listening to this podcast right now. And if Elon Musk is listening to this, I'd say maybe go to your job and stop listening to this podcast. But of course, he's not, right? Unless he somehow gets a tweet that, hey, this Eric Brown guy on the St. Louis podcast is talking shit. Then he might remove me off X, which honestly would be absolutely amazing. That'd be the biggest flex of all time. All right, so I said the bottom 52% of American households essentially do not have as much money combined worth as Elon Musk. So the bottom 52% of U.S. households, roughly, like I said before, 67.6 million families, this is out of 130 million total, hold a combined net worth of approximately 450 to 480 billion, less than Musk's personal fortune. This group, often with median net worths under $50,000, includes working class families burdened by student loans, 1.7 trillion nationally, medical debt, oh, I didn't even bring that up, and stagnant wages. And I'm going to go off on a tangent here real quick. I was having a discussion with a couple of people about student loan debt, about wiping student loan debt. And I'm like, and how the people that didn't go to college are pissed, right, at the opportunity of these people that did go to get, some of their debt wiped. And I understand it. I get it. I will say from one point of view, though, and I think I've said this before on the podcast, if it wasn't for the simple fact that we are essentially indoctrinated, at least I was growing up, and so is pretty much everyone else I know, that college is the next step. It wasn't even, there was no thinking otherwise. That was it, right? And I don't think just wiping the debt is, the other answer either. And simply because, let's say we wipe all the debt right now. Tomorrow, done. It's all gone. Colleges are still charging $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year. They're still unaffordable. So are we just going to continue to wipe debt? Because eventually what I see is, okay, if we're just going to continue to wipe debt, college is essentially free. What are we even doing? Right? But it goes back to the fact that student loans have been federally backed. Everyone can get a federally backed student loan. If everyone can go to college and they're backed by the government, everyone can go get a loan. Now affordability really isn't a thing, right? You can go get a loan. And then, of course, college costs have skyrocketed. And I don't even have the metrics here. Go ahead and do some research. But if you're my age, around 30 years old or so, you know that our parents could essentially pay for college working part-time in college, which is absolutely insane. Because we know that would be essentially impossible nowadays. So now my worry is the fact that the people that are saying essentially, hey, we don't care about all these kids and all this debt. My thing to you is, what did I just say about wealth? We have a massive amount of people, young people, that have a massive amount of student loans. They're not buying houses. They're in debt. Where does that lead them? Say they're 30 years old now. They still have all this debt. They have no net worth. They're not worth anything. They don't have anything in savings. They're essentially paycheck to paycheck. Maybe they could save a little bit. How are they supposed to have kids? How are they supposed to have a family? How are they supposed to get a house? How are they supposed to retire? Everything that being a part of like the United States, that's what we should want, right? I don't think it's a hot take. I don't think it's a hot take to say that I think we spend enough money in taxes that we all pay to have good health care. I'd rather my money be spent here in the U.S. than foreign wars. Is that a hot take? I don't think it is. Let's see here. So the Federal Reserve data shows the top 1% controls a record $52 trillion in wealth. This is up almost 5% in quarter two of 2025 alone. Or this is also about 31% of the nation's total $170 trillion household net worth. While the bottom 50% just hold 2.5% of nationwide household net worth. The bottom 50% hold 2.5% of household net worth in the U.S. The top 0.1% saw their wealth surge 6.5% in the first half of 2025. Obviously because they have investments. And we have an AI bubble right now. Because I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Maybe we haven't, but essentially 80% of the stock market gains have been in 5 stocks backed essentially by AI. That's not real growth. In the 1950s through the 1970s, progressive taxes, top rates over 70%. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm pro-taxing anyone over 50%, because that's just insane. It's like, why would I work if more than half my money is going back somewhere? Regardless, and strong unions kept inequality in check while the top, so that in the 1950s to the 1970s, the top 1% only held 10 to 15% of all net wealth, all wealth in the U.S. Since Reagan-era deregulation and tax cuts, such as the 1986 reforms, the gap has exploded. Wealth inequality now exceeds pre-Great Depression levels, with the three richest Americans, Musk, Bezos, and Zuckerberg, owning more than the bottom, obviously 50% combined. A trend accelerated by 2017 Trump tax cuts, favoring corporations and the wealthy. So let's talk about that a little bit. So billionaires, they pay effective tax rates under 3%. Now, this is via loans against stocks. Go back to what I was saying earlier. While average households face 20 to 30% corporate tax avoidance, siphons almost $100 billion yearly. Meanwhile, minimum wage remains $7.25, unchanged since 2009. And the gig economy, which I have essentially talked shit on since its inception, offer no benefits, trapping 40% of Americans in paycheck to paycheck living amid rising costs for housing. Housing is up 50% since 2020, and it has more than doubled in the last 20 years. More than doubled. For the bottom 52%, median net worth is $40,000 to $50,000, often negative due to $1.1 trillion in credit card debt. 60% cannot afford a $1,000 emergency, leading to higher eviction rates. 3.6 million in 2024. It's a lot. It's what, 1 out of every 100 people? I mean, that's just of the population, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. 340 million population. So we got, if you take the whole population, 1% of those got evicted last year. That's crazy. Matt, did you hear that number? That's insane. All right. And of course, food insecurity. That affects apparently 13% of U.S. households, and I'm sure that number's higher. Contrast that with Musk's $1.5 billion in government subsidies, underscoring how public funds fuel private empires while social safety nets erode. All right. The U.S. has the widest wealth gap. Now, you could look at this through a coefficient. It's called the Gini coefficient, or maybe it's just Gini. Countries like Sweden, 0.33, Japan, 0.32, maintain lower inequality through universal health care, strong unions, and progressive taxation. Globally, wealth inequality dipped slightly since 2000, but the U.S. bucks the trend, with millionaire households growing 21% in 2024 alone amid a shrinking middle class. Musk wealth translates to outsized power, $100 million in political donations in 2024. Influence policy on EVs, space contracts, regulations, and obviously the control he was able to exercise with Doge. Critics like Bernie Sanders warn this moves the U.S. towards oligarchy, which I think I talked about a couple months ago on this podcast, where the U.S. is essentially turning into an oligarchy, even though the U.S. loves to talk shit about Russia and other oligarchies, as we are ourselves turning into one. And the reason being is, of course, since they got they overturned Citizens United, anybody could donate as much money as they want to political campaigns. And just like baseball, in other sports where essentially these teams that are able to significantly outspend other teams, it's going to work like that in politics as well, right? Even if you're like, everyone loves you, you have the best, you'd be a better candidate no matter what for the majority of people. If your competitor is spending 10 times the amount on marketing, it's tough to combat that, right? It's tough to combat that. So essentially what we have allowed is the rich pretty much being able to back whoever they want to put in power in order for them to do whatever that person that put them there wants them to do. And I think most people are aware of this as well. Eventually, this podcast is just going to turn into like the Eric Brown, whatever, something hot take hour. All right. So, if Musk's $485 billion were evenly distributed among the bottom 52%, that is the 67 million households, each would get around $7,100, which would actually be a significant portion for those people who I'm sure, like I already said earlier, majority are in debt. Now, obviously, I'm not here to say that we need to redistribute all of Musk's or these guys' wealth. I don't have a good answer for that. I'm not an economist. Oh my God. I think I was just trying to say this word a couple weeks ago and I couldn't say it. But we got to do something. Because if this trend continues, where are we going to be in 10, 20, 50 years from now? Right? I have friends that are pregnant, have young kids. I want to have kids. Let's say they live to 70, 80. Hopefully, I mean, shit. By the time they're around and they get older, I don't know what they're going to have available to extend life. I'm sure they're going to be selling, hey, why don't you buy a server and you can upload your brain into the server, right? And then live forever. Who knows? Point being is that if it only gets worse from here in terms of equality of wealth, stuff's going to become more and more expensive. The majority of people, the majority of households are going to have less and less money, and that money is not going to be able to go as far because stuff's more expensive, right? Where is that going to leave us? It's concerning. It's highly concerning. All right. If current trajectories persist without major policy intervention, wealth inequality, of course, will worsen significantly by, let's just say, the year 2040 or 2050. This is going to be driven a lot by automation, job displacement, demographic shifts, and, of course, the biggest factor, unchecked corporate power. And it's just going to get, essentially more dangerous here in the U.S. as well, right? According to the U.S. intelligence community, Global Trends 2040 report, persistent income and wealth gaps could exacerbate societal divisions, leading to increased political volatility, protests, potential democratic erosion. In a business-as-usual scenario, the U.S. middle class could further contract due to job polarization, with household debt surging from rising costs in housing, healthcare, and education. By 2050, Pew Research indicates that 70 to 77% of Americans expect inequality to increase. 70 to 77% of Americans expect income inequality to increase. Now, that number should be 100% based on what I just said. If you're listening to this podcast and you're in the 0 to whatever, 30%, I mean, open your eyes. Potentially resulting in a scenario where the top 1% controls the majority of national wealth, while the bottom 50% would dip under 2%. So the bottom 50 in 15 years their wealth could be under 2% of total U.S. wealth. We're going to have, obviously, if you look at speculation, plummeting home ownership, it's already down to 65% in 2025, larger urban slums, heightened social unrest, mirroring pre-depression extremes. However, we could try and fix this problem before we get to that point. I mean, it's already bad. But no one's talking about this. This is the real thing that is affecting us. This is the real reason why we don't have healthcare that's affordable. This is the real reason why we spend money on wars abroad and not on our own people. I think the powers that be want this, obviously. If you want to be on like a little globalism conspiracy, maybe they're trying to weaken the West. It's concerning. Obviously, like I was saying before, we are the wealthiest country. But what does that mean? Do we see it? The average everyday person? Let's just look at the U.S. education system. The U.S. places 15th out of 193 countries, categorized as exceptional but trailing leaders like Iceland and Germany. In higher education, the U.S. excels. Harvard, MIT, Johns Hopkins. Of course, you charge a bunch, you pay for it. However, K through 12 performance is middling. The U.S. ranked 12th in science and 31st in math among 81 companies, below the OECD average and far behind top performers like Singapore and Japan. Literacy rankings are better with the U.S. at 9th globally, but equity gaps persist. Why is that the case? Well, the U.S. spends about $15,000 per K through 12 student annually, among the highest globally, but funding is unevenly distributed via local property taxes, leading to and this is the exact thing in St. Louis, where a lot of people if you have kids, don't want to live in St. Louis City because they don't want to have to go to Roosevelt High School and these other things. They'd rather live in, Rockwood or go to Parkway or go to these different school districts. And this is the exact reason here. And I know, I look at my property tax that goes for my still 2014 Corolla that I'm driving around because it cost me essentially nothing, and how much I pay for property taxes. It's insane. And this is also the same case kind of with healthcare, which I've talked about on this podcast. We spend more per person than any other country, and we have significantly worse healthcare coverage and options than other first world nations. And it's because it's due to greed, power, and money. I mean, as simply as that. This perpetuates inequality with 23% of U.S. children in poverty-affected schools performing worse on standardized tests. Teacher shortages with over 300,000 vacancies in 2025 and low pay, average starting salary $44,000. This is below many of our peer countries, contributes to high turnover and burnout. Political factors, of course, are a huge thing as well. With curriculum battles over topics such as history and science. This diverts our resources from actual core improvements and core learning. Additionally, the focus on standardized testing over holistic education, combined with rising student debt, hinders access to higher education for lower income groups, compared to top-ranked systems like Finland's. Of course, in the U.S., the U.S. last among 10 high-income countries, despite spending 17% of our GDP on healthcare. 17% of our GDP spent on healthcare, nearly double the average. The healthcare index places the U.S. 15th globally, behind Taiwan and South Korea, with poor marks in access and equity. Within the U.S., state-level disparities are stark. Massachusetts ranks first domestically, while Mississippi is last. Of course, I've talked about this as well. Our life expectancy is below the average, and infant mortality is higher. Why the poor rankings? Greed, power, money. I'm just kidding. That's just what I have to say. But really, that's what it comes down to. At some point, we're going to have to look at ourselves, at these companies, and start holding people accountable. Just because we want capitalism and we want to be able to, make it here, right, in the U.S. That's why people wonder the U.S. dream, which is dying. That's slowly going to go away. And we're not going to be the place that people want to come to. Which I get. Our infrastructure is also shit. We have a C overall for the American Society of Civil Engineers. The roads are at a D+, transit at D, wastewater D+. Globally, the U.S. ranks around 11th in infrastructure quality, behind leaders like Singapore and Netherlands. Singapore's killing it. For roads specifically, the U.S. ranks 13th in quality out of 141 countries, despite having the world's largest network, over 4 million miles, with 40% in poor and mediocre condition, costing drivers $130 billion annually in repairs. Jeez. I'm a testament to that. St. Louis roads are awful. Awful. They've been worse this year than any year I can remember. It is October 22nd right now of 2025, and there was damage done last winter that was never taken care of or addressed. And this isn't just in let's just, poor areas of St. Louis. This is in large, like Manchester Road, for example. Of course, look at our interstate system and our highways. How many deaths have we had out in Wentzville just this year along I-70? We spend and we spend and we spend. It seems like we spend more and it gets us nowhere. Obviously, we got the government shutdown, enters day 22. I will say this like I've said it every time. If the government enters a shutdown, they should be locked in cells or in Congress or wherever, and they shouldn't be allowed to leave until they figure it out. Or what you do is we just have a budget going into the year instead of reconciling at the end. It's called kicking the can down the road. I think whenever you're able to get retirement, you can no longer be a politician. Make that a rule. 65, maybe 70. Maybe. You got to take some cognitive tests. But why do we have 80-year-olds in? You're going to die. Why do you even care what happens in 10 years from now? Hopefully you have kids and you're not a narcissist, but I think you should want to be here for the stuff that you're passing. It makes no sense. So there's over 800,000 employees currently furloughed. The economy is losing $1.2 billion weekly. Polls show 55% blame Trump. I mean, that makes sense. Senate to vote again on Friday. Bipartisanship seems unlikely. Trump hits at emergency declaration for funding. Well, my other talking points are Israel, Hamas. I just refuse to talk about that this week. With what I was saying earlier on the podcast, people, now we're just kind of chatting. I mean, what are we even talking about anymore? Thank you for still listening if you are. We got a major cartel crackdown. I mean, I think we could safely assume at this point that's all games. Considering if you've watched movies like Sicario, you know that intelligence agencies might move a lot of that drugs for them or let them in exchange for. Hey, these intelligence agencies need dirty money because they do dirty things. At least car prices are falling. That's nice. There was a major climate protest in London. Oh, the No Kings. Oh, the No Kings. Here's my thought on No Kings. Here's my thought. This is for St. Louis only. We have a king here in St. Louis. His name is Sam Page. He was reelected this year or last year. He is a tyrant. That guy is the St. Louis king that got reelected. So you want to march on his fucking building. But somehow he got reelected. Now let's keep in mind why he's the tyrant. Because we had essentially LA laws in St. Louis County with COVID mandates and on restaurants for, let me just Google this. How long did St. Louis County? All right, let's see here. All I remember is that like it was already a long time and then everything started coming out about how, you know, it's all kind of, you're not helping people by just not letting them go anywhere. He ended mask mandate in February of 22, almost 2 years later. I don't want to talk about fucking COVID. Who cares? We all lived through it. Horrible time. And it really is not good. It's really made, you know, I'm going to have next week, I'm going to have a real estate agent, broker, investor on, and all of the gripes that I have bitched about. Apparently, about 80% of mortgages in the U.S. are at 3%, average 3% interest rate, which means 80% of the people in the U.S. have no reason to move unless they get a different job, die. Well, why are you moving? You're going to go buy a house that's, let's say you sell your house worth $500,000. You're going to go buy a $300,000 house, same mortgage. You're paying the same amount. But again, what are you going to do? It's a waiting game almost. Like people our age that like essentially just got to the point of being able to buy a home over COVID. It's the worst time in literally like 25 years to buy a house. Yeah, so go march on Sam Page's building. Also, I will say last thing about the No Kings thing. And it's not really even about No Kings, more so than I saw a post today on Facebook. It was like, can someone explain to me why people think Trump is a king? And I have a great example. All of those university students that were pro-Palestine, talking out about Israel, anti-Israel, go ahead and look. There's actually a court case last month. Read about it. He was using his power to silence those that had a specific belief. That is tyrannical. That is tyrannical. Sorry. There's an example. There you go. You wanted one, you got one. Can't argue it. Now, maybe you're going to be like, hey, they're here to learn. They should shut their mouth. Okay, maybe a little bit, but also that's why this is America, dude. This is the USA. If they wanted that shit, they go to China. We want them here. Right, that's why yes. Anyways, all right. That's all we have for today. I'm done ranting. We'll be back next week to talk about Bezos, Elon Musk, and Zuckerberg being on the Epstein list. Goodbye. Just kidding. As always, our sponsors, Please before that, like, review, subscribe. We appreciate everyone's support. What I just said was a joke, by the way. Please, show us some love. We got some great sponsors here. We record this in Half Coast Studios here in St. Louis. They could take care of your recordings, the distribution, the editing, all of that stuff. If you say you recorded at your house or you got somewhere else and you just need help maybe with the editing, or maybe you just need help with the distribution, they can help you with that stuff. Visit them at halfcoaststudios.com. Or, of course, because they are a client of Vibe Media, the best damn marketing company on the planet, if you type in Podcast Studio St. Louis, they show up number one on Google. If you want to show up number one on Google as well, you can reach out to Vibe Media, or just reach out to myself across all the platforms. You'll be able to talk to me. Again, Vi.media or Air Kempf Brown across all platforms. We appreciate everyone's support. We'll see y'all next week. Hopefully we'll have more money then. Bye-bye.